Welcome to my Woman in Leadership and Business podcast. Have you ever asked yourself, can a CEO be abused? In this month of domestic abuse awareness, today we are going to explore what is abuse and if senior persons, people in senior positions, women in leadership, business, or actually any gender may also be in abusive situations. Stay tuned. Hello again, everyone. My name is Shrishta Tiwari. I am a woman in leadership and business emotional intelligence coach and healer. And what that means is that I help you to honor all of your emotions, especially the low frequency ones, the sadness, the anger, the bitterness, the pain, even feelings of overwhelm. I help you to honor them, understand what they're trying to teach you, clear them away, and build a bridge for you to the life that you want. As I mentioned, today we are talking about domestic abuse awareness. And anytime I'm talking about this topic and I need some support, I go to my go to psychologist, Denise Jittan-Johnson, who you are seeing on the screen with me. Denise has a wealth of knowledge in respect to abuse. She's a clinical psychologist. She supported me on my that is available on my YouTube channel in 2021. And I'm really happy to welcome her here today. How are you, Denise?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for your continued work in this area as well. Yeah.
Yes, it's always such a pleasure to have you. You always bring such awesome knowledge and insight. And as we start off, given that this is a different audience to the work you would have done with me before, I'm going to start off with basic questions, but we are going to attune the podcast really to women in business and leadership, or any gender in business and leadership would be able
Mhm.
to understand what abuse is. So let's start with what is abuse.
Yeah. So abuse is really one of those words that gets tossed around a lot, like, in conversation and whatnot. And at its simplest form, abuse can be defined as any action that intentionally harms or injures another person. And when we talk about harm, it's not only physical harm, but it could look like emotional harm, neglect, assault, verbal abuse, financial abuse. So, when we're thinking about abuse, the simple way is like if you actually hurt somebody, right? But thinking that abuse is so much more when it comes to these intimate partner relationships or domestic relationships, right? Because if we think about abuse just as hurting someone, all of us are probably guilty at some point in our life of causing some sort of hurt to somebody intentionally or unintentionally. But the hallmark of abusive situations are when we have dynamics of power and control. Yeah. So if somebody, what abuse really means is that somebody is trying to exert control over another person through whatever abusive tactics they might want to employ. Yeah.
Yeah, that exertion of control, and I think we understand abuse to really be mostly physical, but abuse can come in many ways. And as you know, I really am an advocate for the mental and emotional abuse because, as we understand, and as I know you can explain, the precursor to the physical or the financial, those types of abuse, is really the mental and emotional abuse. So, can you just explain a little bit more on the mental and emotional side, what exactly that looks like in an abusive relationship?
Yes. So when we're talking about that mental and emotional abuse, it's the systematic degradation of a person's sense of self. So it's separating them from things that they enjoy, things that they identify as uniquely them. And yes, I know we have our little ones with us, so we're going to be hearing some extra noises, but that's what life as a mom sometimes is, right? But yeah, so when we're thinking of mental and emotional abuse, it's really this degradation of your sense of self-worth and your belief that you deserve better. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is something as well, your sense of self and your self-worth that we don't know how to build or how to give value to that because we grow up in this society that really normalizes abusive behavior. And
Yeah.
I want to ask you, another misconception that a lot of persons have is that abuse takes place in of society. So the thinking is if you're accomplished, if you're an academic, if you're maybe a CEO or in some leadership position, that you cannot be abused. What are your views on that?
Yeah. So when we're really looking through abuses through this lens of power and control, you tend to think that those who are in power or appear to be in control of their professional lives or their professional situations might be exempt from being victim of abuse. But the exact opposite is true, is that anybody, no matter what level of education, what level of advancement in your career you have, you there are still persons who are victim of abuse who are in these positions, because just because you're in control of, say, a boardroom or in control of your executive situation or your professional position, it doesn't mean that you're in control of every aspect of your life. You could be in control in the boardroom but not in control in the living room, and those are some things, those factors that we really have to pay attention to, because thinking about abuse, not only as physical abuse, but psychological, emotional abuse, is that you don't know what may be said behind the scenes. Sometimes there's this systematic deterioration of your own accomplishments. There may be statements of, oh, you only got there because of, or the only
Yeah.
reason that you're earning that much is, just making excuses or minimizing and devaluing your own accomplishment. So it's understanding that no one is exempt from being victim of abuse. No matter what gender you are, no matter what position you are, it's a
Yeah.
very real thing that anybody could experience.
And that is so important to me for persons to realize because a lot of persons I interact with don't even think that they could be in this situation because of course they're accomplished and well educated and they may have really good positions, and because the abuse may not be physical but more on the mental and emotional side, they don't recognize it to be that. And of
Mhm,
course then there is also the shame or the stigma of being in this abusive relationship as opposed to acknowledging it for what it is and working to build yourself into a place where you can truly honor your most authentic self. So I really wanted, I'm glad you made that point, especially in respect of the fact that you could be in control in the boardroom or in that executive suite, but then other areas of your life may be suffering. As one of the things I am really passionate about also is life integration and helping people to understand that success in one area of your life will not bring you the happiness you are looking for if other areas in your life are not going well. And sometimes what we do is we focus on the successful area and try to block out the rest and find a path around it. But
mhm,
while you may get success from that internally, for me at least, you don't get that integrated happiness in life.
mhm.
So the
Yeah.
last thing I want to ask you is, as people leaders, as women in leadership positions, or even men in leadership positions, how would how can they identify if someone on their team may be in an abusive situation, and if they believe that they may be, what can they do to support them?
Mhm. So, one of the first signs that people leaders often notice is a change in your output, a change in your productivity, and your efficiency. So, if you start noticing that there are these shifts in productivity, that may be a little bit of a sign that maybe we need to pay a little bit closer attention to this person. Yeah. If it is that you realize that this person, obviously, if we're thinking about physical abuse, you might see unexplained bruises and marks or bumps on them that happen more often than you would think would be accidental. Yeah. So paying attention to the physical signs, also being able to be aware enough of what the people you interact with, what their baseline is. So if you notice shifts from what their baseline is, understanding that something may be different. Another thing to look at is if they are cowering or hypervigilant to different noises or unexpected things happening in their environment. Those are often signs that there are uncomfortable situations that are going on in the home or outside of the workplace. Yeah. Another thing to be able to pay attention to as well is if they're very apprehensive or jittery about changes in schedules. Yeah. So if it is that they're expected to stay a 5 minutes late, and or if you see that they're very apprehensive about shifts in scheduling or expectations, that may be a sign that something deeper is happening as well. Yeah.
Well, and that is so it's such an interesting all of these things that not all most of these things that you're speaking about, like the change in output, maybe being apprehensive and not wanting to change schedules, those are things that are also related in the career world to performance. And it
Hmm.
is so easy to mis misinterpret the cause of somebody's underperformance, especially
Hmm.
when they may be in a situation that they are not comfortable speaking about. And I want to ask you though, these things that you describe, like the cowering, being hyper vigilant, and even being jittery, is that related to the more physical side of things, or do you find that with the mental and emotional side as well?
It's related to the mental and emotional side as well. So thinking about just the hypervigilance, you're not necessarily only hypervigilant to physical things, but you could be hypervigilant to an unexpected presence in the room,
Right.
because you might have to be a little bit more together. You mightn't be
Yes.
able to show your emotions as much because you're wary about how this person might react, and things like that. So this hypervigilance and jittery kind of nature isn't only because of physical abuse, but it could also be signs of emotional abuse as well. Other things that I forgot to mention too is if you think that this person's partner might be overly imposing. They may show up to work unexpectedly. They may have these grand gestures of love or affection that seem to come out of nowhere. So there might be that aspect of love bombing, or just checking in. If the individual is very apprehensive when they receive a call from this person, or they have to take this call no matter what meeting or situation they might be in. Those are signs as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so important for persons in leadership positions who run with teams to understand everything that could be affecting persons on your team. And these things, they may seem simple, like the change in output. It seems simple,
Mhm.
even like I remember, there are instances where somebody come up behind you and
Mhm.
people jump and everybody laughs, right? Because haha, I scared you. But you never know if there's something much deeper going on under that has this person in that hypervigilant state or jittery state.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you talk about the partner being imposing or even the love bombing, because these are things that make people think that, wow, she is so loved, she's so lucky. And
Mhm.
sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it could be so much deeper than that on an abusive level. So
Mhm.
I really want to thank you for coming and speaking about abuse through this lens, especially for women in senior positions, women and men in senior positions, in leadership positions, to know that abuse can be happening for you. It may not be physical, it may be mental, emotional, financial, economic. And if it is happening to you, it's okay. It's nothing that you did wrong. The important thing is that you build and know your self worth enough to get the help that you need. And if you can contact Denise, I have her website below, www.djjpsych.com. If you are in need of free support, there are many organizations within Trinidad and even the jurisdiction that you're in. There is some organization that would offer support in terms of psychology or in terms of legal advice that can help you. And for people leaders, know that some of the signs you can look out for, if it is you suspect someone in your team is going through the situation, can be a change in output, cowering, being hyper vigilant, being apprehensive or jittery about changes and things like schedules, and even if you see signs of love bombing. So, Denise, before we come off, do you have any final message you would like to give to our viewers in terms of abuse?
Yeah. So I think that the biggest preventative measure that we could have for abuse or women or individuals who are going through abusive situations is to have spaces of openness where they feel safe to be able to come to us, to speak to us. So women who are in leadership positions create this sense of comfort that you are open to listening to whatever it is that they come to share. If somebody does report instances of abuse to you, know that you should take them seriously and offer support in any way that the person says that they need as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is so important as a leader to create that safe space so that persons are comfortable enough to confide in you,
Mhm.
whatever it is they're going through. And as a leader, that also helps you to better plan. Of course, when you have information up front, you could easier put things in place to deal with a contingency than having it fall upon you and you are more caught off guard in respect of continuity. So,
Mhm.
Denise, I want to thank you again so much for coming and supporting. Again, please reach out to Denise if you are in need in any sort of psychological support. And I will see you guys again next week. Bye.